everyone. Welcome to Credential Up Houston. My name is Margaret Ford Fisher. In 2017, the Texas Senate approved a bill for the operation of autonomous or self-driving vehicles on Texas roads. Shortly thereafter, a pilot program was established between the Houston Metropolitan Transit Authority and Texas Southern University. Autonomous vehicles is not new, but the 2017 legislation in Texas is new. So at this time, we will talk to two guests about the pilot program in Houston, training opportunities for careers related to autonomous vehicles, and prospects for the future. Our guests are Attorney Kimberly J. Williams, Chief Innovation Officer at the Houston Metropolitan Transit Authority, or Metro, and Dr. Gwendolyn C. Goodwin, Assistant Professor and Interim Director of the Center for Transportation Training and Research at Texas Southern University, or TSU. My thanks to both of you for joining us. So legislation for autonomous vehicles is not new, as I mentioned before. So in fact, what I found was that 38 states, along with the District of Columbia, have over the years enacted legislation. 12 states authorized testing, and 16 states and the District of Columbia authorized full deployment, which I think is very interesting. So Attorney, how this innovation originated in Houston, and also about the pilot with TSU.
Absolutely. It has been an interesting journey. And so it started for us really when we joined the Texas Innovation Alliance. The Innovation Alliance is actually a creation of the Texas Department of Transportation, and it includes 9 cities around the state, and Houston being one of those cities. And so collectively, we put in an application to become an autonomous vehicle proving ground. And the passage of the legislation and the federal program calling for proving grounds from around the country just came at the perfect time. And we were successful in being named one of the 10 proving grounds from around the country. We were the only state application that was accepted for the program. So what that meant was that each of us had to look at our respective cities and develop a pilot or a demonstration program utilizing autonomous vehicles that we could use to demonstrate, the learnings, the technology, the effectiveness, and answer some outstanding questions around the technology and how it would be used. And so taking that concept back to what we call Team Houston, which has a number of mobility stakeholders as a part of it, and most significantly, Texas Southern University. And so they stepped up to the plate and volunteered to be the first location for phase 1.
Well, that's exciting. So I'm wondering about the students, and whether the students were excited or skeptical. What were some of their comments? Dr. Goodwin?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. So I think it was a great opportunity for the students to experience this. Texas Southern University is a historically Black college and university, and typically technology like AV technology or anything that's brand new, often people of minorities and lower income people never get to experience it until years later. So it was a great experience to have that on campus. And the students reacted just like any other college student. Curiosity. They were taking a lot of photos. So there was a lot of fanfare thanks to some of the activities that we created with Metro. And then there was, after the novelty sort of wore off, then there was a lot of distracted walking. So as students were walking around campus with their phones, and then it just became normal. So I think when we interviewed them, about 80% of them said that they would love to be in an AV in the future. So we were very excited about that.
That is very, very good. So the students were able to embrace that technology almost immediately.
Yes.
And it helped to also influence the direction that they are going to pursue academically as well, no doubt. So, as you look at some of the lessons learned from the pilot, tell us what some of those lessons were that you learned, Attorney Williams, that can be applied to your second phase, which I understand will be starting not too far into the future, because you were one of the recipients as well of a $1.5 million grant that was just recently awarded. So tell us about that, the lessons learned, and then about this next phase.
Absolutely. So for lessons learned, we learned quite a bit. As Dr. Goodwin mentioned, one of the things we wanted to assess was how people would respond to the vehicle, particularly the notion of having a vehicle that can drive itself. We have an operator on board to ensure the safety and the operation of the vehicle. But what we learned is that people are very excited about the technology. They're willing to embrace it. They're willing to use it. We also found that the technology worked very well as a form of moving people. We call it a first and last mile connection. So moving people as a circulator around the campus. We learned a lot about the operations and maintenance of the vehicle. In some ways, it is a vehicle like any other. We did have some mechanical issues in the project. And then also that it is technology. When we first got the vehicle, the software that was operating it had an issue. And so we learned about the balance between the traditional, mechanical nature of a vehicle, and then also this new iteration of being more technologically driven. And so those are the things that we're excited to explore more of. Phase 2 does involve having that vehicle perform that first and last mile connection for the university, but also to transition to mixed streets and further connect you to the transit opportunities that are right nearby, including our 54 Scott bus line, which is one of our heavily used routes, and then our light rail line, which is a part of our high capacity transit network. And so we're very excited to move to the next phase and see how the technology continues to evolve and mature.
So Metro's CEO, Mr. Lambert, was quoted as saying that Metro wants to learn if autonomous buses could help solve some of the region's mobility issues. So I'd like to find out from you, Dr. Goodwin, what are your thoughts about that? Tell us how you think this could help solve some of the mobility issues, particularly given your work in the transportation area.
Some of the things that we've been looking at TSU is exactly that. What are the issues, and how would we be able to resolve some of the problems that we have? So working with other councils of governments, I'm going to skip talking about in the urban areas, but really talking about it more fully in the rural areas. We've done some studies there to see how would this vehicle react in the rural areas. Would it, where you have more remote transportation options. So you have bigger problems of finding operators and really being able to keep those operators, folks to drive the buses. And so this would be a wonderful opportunity to do that. I think one of the biggest challenges in the rural areas would be the conditions of the roadways, and then just the expense of operating the vehicle. And then the third item would actually be the durability of the vehicle. Some of that, and it's just an expensive venture. And so finding the funding to support that in the rural areas will be a lot more difficult.
That's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. But certainly a worthwhile effort, so that's something that rural transit agencies should begin to look into, because it's something that you want to be proactively thinking about. How can you improve services continuously and stay in with the latest?
That's great. So we're going to continue that line of discussion. In fact, I'd like for us to talk about the technology. And this is largely an electric vehicle. You mentioned the driver that is on board. So what we'd like to do is to take a break now. And when we return, we're going to talk about those issues. And we're going to also focus on the future and new career opportunities as well. So please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Roll over. Chance high five. All right.
When you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique. And your mother and... I am totally a hot person. Right, guys? Thanks for being honest. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org.
If a natural disaster shows up at your doorstep, you can't just turn it away. That's why it's important to prepare for emergencies before they show up. Go to ready.gov/plan to find the tools and tips you need. And make a plan today.
Houston Community College is safe, clean, and open for learning. We're sanitizing our classrooms and reducing class sizes so you can feel good when you come back. Register now at hccs.edu/college your way.
Welcome back to Credential Up Houston. Our guests are attorney Kimberly Williams and Dr. Gwendolyn Goodwin. We're talking about self-driving vehicles, the future and lucrative career opportunities. And in the previous segment, we talked just briefly about the technology, and there was reference made to the rural areas as well and getting the funding associated with that. So Dr. Goodwin, we'd like to go to you very briefly to tell us about the rural areas, and then Ms. Williams, I'd like for you to tell us about the funding opportunities and the technology. So Dr. Goodwin.
If we're in the rural areas, what we're seeing is that need, as always, for transportation is far greater than what they're able to supply. And with them, the funding is very limited in that they are, they're broken into two different pools. One is one that provides transportation for seniors and persons with disabilities, and one for the general public. They also have some other little pools and programming that they're using. But because of the vehicle's cost, so there would be some issues that rural transit agencies would have to look at. And generally they don't have, as like I said earlier, they don't have robust funding for it. Certainly they don't operate with the massive amount of support that you have with maintenance like you do with some of the more urban systems like Metro. So there would be a big skill set, there would be some operational needs. A smaller area in Arlington operated a pilot program very successfully. They didn't have a large crew, so it can be done, but it's with us, I know operating our shuttle project, it was very helpful to have Metro come in and troubleshoot any issues that were there and provide maintenance.
I certainly understand. So Attorney Williams, tell us about the technology components associated with that and funding, because you've been very successful through the group that you've been working with to secure funding as well. So speak to that for us, please.
Funding is always a challenge, particularly when you're talking about anything dealing with public transportation. And the advent of technology has been no exception. And so some of the things that we've looked at is partnerships. As Dr. Goodwin mentioned, Arlington, Texas did a pilot previously. And so really having conversations with our colleagues to refine our program so that we can make it as cost efficient as possible. And as I mentioned, we have a group of mobility stakeholders. So this was a joint and collective effort. I would say, and giving full credit to Metro, recognizing that it does take funding, it does take projects to actually start to advance technology. And they have made a significant investment in being the lead for the region's first autonomous shuttle. And so we leveraged that with support from the city of Houston. And so we were able to use that to help keep phase one operational. And now pursuing federal funding through grant opportunities is now the way that we're looking to continue to expand the program.
It's interesting because I'm sure that you remember the futuristic cartoon with George Jetson. And it said that, he really had a technological utopia. He had the video chat and his driverless car that he could ride in with his family, go to work, and then fold up the car and fit it into his briefcase. So I'm wondering from you, what do you see the future holding with respect to the driverless vehicle and how we move about? Because really the future is now, and there is stiff competition, and there are many other states and of course many other countries as well that are already advancing the work that they're doing with the driverless vehicles. So what does the future look like for you, Attorney Williams? It may not be the George Jetson type of future, but as we progress with the work that you're doing, what do you see for the city of Houston and the counties that you're working with?
I think you'll definitely see more usage of autonomous vehicles. Our focus is obviously on public transportation. And one of the things that we're looking to do in phase 2 of the project is use a larger size vehicle. We do eventually want to get to an autonomous bus. And so we have confirmed that the technology works through the number of low speed pilots that we've done with the smaller shuttles. The phase 2 for us will have a larger mid-sized vehicle, will be the first in the industry once we're completed. And so we're quickly advancing the technology to get to the point where you will see a full-size vehicle. We're already starting to see autonomous vehicles being used in other situations like neuro. The city of Houston is fortunate to be one of the cities that neuro is using to do their autonomous vehicle grocery delivery service. And that's going extremely well and is in the process of being expanded. You also see the state of Texas has recently launched a autonomous freight trucking initiative on Texas highways. So this technology, and I know, when people think of George Jetson, they think it's too far-fetched or, 20 or 30 or 40 years in the future. I think this technology is here, and I think it's evolving and growing every day. And I think it won't be 30 or 40 years. It'll probably be closer to 10 to 20 years, where you'll start to see robo-taxis, you'll start to see autonomous shuttles and buses, you'll start to see more autonomous delivery services. You'll see it in other formats like drones. So the technology is here.
Yes, it certainly is. And so as we think about safety, reliability, and time to market, that's in effect what you're talking about as well, that time to market. And I'm wondering from you, Dr. Goodwin, in the work that you're doing, and particularly as we think about AI and the highways and the sensors and all of that, how is AI being used to help prepare the drivers of regular vehicles to feel that comfort level that there will be the safety and the reliability of being on the highway with driverless vehicles? So tell us about that.
Well, I think we see it, you just mentioned it, we see it used in our vehicles right now at a very low level. So you see some of the features that are autonomous, the vehicle being able to pull itself out of a tight parking spot and let you use it. I think the more familiar people become with the technology, the more comfortable they will be. So in the future, what we hope we'll see is that we'll have vehicles that are able to talk and communicate with each other. So some 15, 20 years down in the future. And so it will, the driver will be completely able to relax. It won't be really a driver, but you'll be able to relax and enjoy, and the vehicles will talk to each other and be able to drive at a closer distance than what we see now, what we call connected vehicles. So we hope to see that with automobiles as well as with buses and other vehicles. I may also want to say I wear a maritime hat too, so we're beginning to see autonomous vehicles. I think the first vehicle was launched a year ago, an autonomous container ship. So we're seeing it in all areas of transportation, and I think it's going to be great.
Yes, of course. And with the first pilot, I thought that was exciting. And you did not have a vehicle with students on it without having a driver there, just in case you needed to have that intervention. So that was great. So we're going to take another break. And when we return, I'd like for us to talk about some of the career opportunities that many of our students would like to know about, and the viewers as well. So with this break, we're going to refresh and we will continue our discussion. So please stay with us.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
There's no better place to knock out the basics than HCC. Whether you learn online, on campus, or both, HCC is the safe, flexible, affordable option. Register now at hccs.edu/college your way.
Welcome back to Credential Up Houston and our discussion about the future of autonomous vehicles in Houston and in Texas. And so what we discussed in the last segment was very, very exciting about some of the technology and about the future. And what I'd like for us to focus on now are some of the careers. And I understand that with some of the jobs that will be available, particularly in the engineering field, that the employees would be able to earn over $200,000 a year almost immediately. So what are some of the careers that you would suggest that our viewers and our students who are currently enrolled start thinking about and focusing on as they prepare for the future, and some of those career moves that they can make into gainful employment?
I think for me, what I see as one of the areas is definitely computer science, because the vehicles have to be programmed and mapped. And I think that's a significant part. But, you know, and then also the technical aspects of maintaining the connections between the software and the vehicle. And I also think intelligent traffic signaling systems, so the traffic engineering components, significant as well, because these vehicles are able to communicate with their environment. And then obviously planning, because these vehicles are different. They have to operate a certain way. And so the planning part of it is significant. And I think another area that people miss is also land use. So, the real estate piece of it, because as Dr. Goodwin mentioned, you have to have the right road net and the symmetries and turn radiuses for it to operate in. So I think all those are careers that people don't necessarily associate with autonomous vehicles, but is a very important component.
Very good. Dr. Goodwin, your thoughts about the careers that you're preparing students for at TSU to move into the industry, and what would you recommend for others as well?
Everything that Ms. Williams indicated, and I want to add cybersecurity. So we talk a lot about that, but it's really important when you're dealing with software and so many different networks that it has to remain secure. So that's a huge an important step. Also, we want, in specific, C++ programming.
Yes.
That's one of the critical needs in this particular industry. Computer-aided design and drafting, debugging. So a lot of it is going to deal with security and programming. But also there's some opportunities for semi-skilled occupations like analysts and data scientists, folks in finance. There's a component to figuring out how much a project will cost. And so those are great careers to move into. Marketing, as we talked before. And then the creative side, of course, would be design and communications as well. So it's one thing to have a product, but in order to get it out and help people understand it, learn about it, why it's important, why it's being used, I think communication skills and marketing go hand in hand. So a lot of really good operations. In addition to some of the other skills would be maintenance. You will always need a mechanic to service this. And so finding and developing programs in high school and at community college and at the 4-year at our level, you need to have certifications that people can obtain to overlay with their education.
You know, that's very good. And for those students who are in the academic fields, you mentioned some of them, but art, I was reading about art and math. They said you simply cannot have enough math. So take as much math, as many mathematics courses as you possibly can. You'll need the calculus, you'll need all of those courses so that you'll be proficient there. And then in engineering, you know, the design aspect that you mentioned, and with the software engineering as well. The engineering specialist would focus on the sensors and the product. This engineer would be essential, and the machine learning and robotics. All of those are so exciting. And I think that's enough to keep our students eager to learn and to go into the field of work. And so that raises a question about how do students now, since there are more and more jobs that are becoming available, how do students prepare to interview for jobs in the autonomous vehicle industry? What should they say? What should they include on their resumes? Obviously, they'll reference their training, but what are your thoughts? What would you be looking for, Ms. Williams?
I think for me, definitely, as you mentioned, the technical background and skill set. But at the end of the day, this is a product that will serve the public. And so one of the things that I failed to mention and we hadn't talked about yet is the user experience and understanding human behavior. And so, yes, it is definitely state-of-the-art 21st century technology, but you have to understand how people will use it and how they interface with it. So I would want to see that balance where they have developed that technical background, but also those soft skills and that understanding of how someone might interact with the vehicle, because that's an important part of planning, particularly if it's a vehicle without an operator on board. I think the other thing I would look at is curiosity to see what that student is doing to stay current. This is an ever-evolving technology and field. And so I would want to see that they're keeping up, that they're continuing to read journals or articles or keep up with projects that are happening around the country. As you mentioned, there are 16 of them, right?
Yes.
Just that continual curiosity, because you will need that to keep up in this industry.
That's right. And so, as we draw to a close of our program today, I would like to hear from you about those persons who are the traditionalists, in a sense, with the cars that we are accustomed to, the buses that they are accustomed to repairing. How do you prepare that group to now look to the future, which is now, in order to become more experienced and trained for the industry and AV, without having that fear that somehow or the other they're going to lose their jobs? So very quickly, Ms. Williams, what are your thoughts?
That's a great question. And it is one that we take very seriously, because it's the people who make our service run and, allows us to do the things that we do. And so what I always encourage our workforce to do is to continue to learn and stay engaged. We created opportunities throughout our pilot program where we invited employees to come out. We invited students to come out. We invited community groups to come out to take a ride on the vehicle, to talk to the attendant and stay current and stay familiar. As Dr. Goodwin mentioned, at the end of the day, this is a vehicle, and some of that traditional skill set is just as needed with AVs as they are with traditional vehicles.
Dr. Goodwin, what are your thoughts?
I was going to say it's up to us at the university and community college level to develop this programming to be trendsetters in our area. So right now we don't have a lot of these certificates going on, but I think to meet the demands, I think we need to begin to collaborate and figure out how can we meet the needs of our students.
And we are going to do exactly. You're right. So Attorney Williams and Dr. Goodwin, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us and for a very enlightening 21st century conversation. And I would like to also thank you, our viewers, for watching. Our conversation today indicates that the future really is now. So as we close, I would like to remind you to Credential Up Houston. We'll see you again.